Hello, it's Mr. Westra here with Half Brother 22, part number 2. I biked all the way down to the university. It was drizzling, but not too cold. In Toronto, the roads would be piled with snow. It took over an hour, pedaling hard, almost no thoughts at all in my head except little shards and loops about Zan and Dad. I knew the residence building Peter lived in, but that was about it, so I had to ask around before someone gave me his room number. He wasn't in. I didn't know what else to do, so I just sat down on the floor and waited. The hallway smelled like old shoes and beer. Finally, Peter showed up, his army surplus satchel loaded down with library books. "What's up, man?" he asked, looking surprised. "How long you been waiting out here?" He let me into his room, which was a bit musty and very messy. "Did you know?" I demanded. I had an idea, but I wasn't sure. "How come you never told me?" I must have sounded really angry, because his eyes widened. He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Ben, but it was kind of your mom and dad's job, not mine." He was right, and I wasn't really angry with him. It wasn't like he could have done anything to change Dad's mind. They say he's not learning language. Peter scoffed and shook his head. They're wrong. They say we can't keep him. "How'd you get down here?" he asked. "Biked." "Biked? You've got to be starving. Come on downstairs. I'll buy you a burger." He led me down to the main floor cafeteria where we lined up with the tray, and he told me to get whatever I wanted. "Onion rings?" he offered. "No thanks." "Fries?" "No thanks." "Jello?" "Okay," I said. "I was just kidding about the Jello," he said. "I really wouldn't eat that. That white whippy stuff on the top is made from gasoline or something. It takes 6 months to digest." I thought of Zan and how much he loved Jello, and put it on my tray. We sat down near a window overlooking some huge rhododendron bushes. "We've got to figure out how to keep Zan," I said. Between bites of my burger, I rattled off everything Dad had said about why we couldn't keep him at the house. "It's a big job," Peter agreed. "If I paid you, would you take care of him?" "Ben," I talked faster, "I've got quite a bit saved up, and then I'd figure out—" "Ben, I'd do it for free." I stared at him. "You would?" "Well, I'd need to eat and pay for school, but there's a lot more to it than that. I couldn't do it alone. You'd need more people, and then there are all the other costs." "See, I was thinking about maybe fundraising," I said. "We could charge for visits. Our school groups could come." "You're talking about a kind of zoo, or renting him out for commercials?" Peter blew out a big breath. "Well, that's a whole other can of worms. We put him in showbiz, and we're making him sing for his supper all over again." I remember how Dad had turned down a couple of offers to use Zan in TV commercials. They'd want him to put him in overalls and muddy boots and get him to walk around the kitchen and make a mess, and then show how clean you could clean up, even after all that, if you just used their amazing new kind of soap. Even though the money was tempting, Dad had thought it would interfere with the experiment and the family stuff, and it would look like we were profiting from Zan instead of studying him. But that was all over now. "I don't like it either," I said. "But it's better than getting him sent away, isn't it? You don't think Dad would send him to a lab, do you?" Peter looked out the windows for a few seconds. "I don't think so." You won't tell anyone else about this, right?" I said. He shook his head. "I think a few people are picking up rumors. That robot, Ryan Cross, he seems to somehow have some idea about what's going on." I said, "I just don't want anyone quitting on Zan right now. Dad says we've got enough money until the spring." Peter nodded. "Bottom line, Ben, even if your dad had money, he doesn't want Zan around. He'll see it as an embarrassment, you know? The experiment he lost control of. The one that got away. Come on, throw your bike in my trunk and I'll drive you home. Your parents are going to be worried about you." Mom and Dad fought that night. They woke me up. My digital clock said it was past 1 in the morning. They were still in the living room, so I quietly made my way to the top of the stairs. "Can't just make a unilateral decision like that," Mom was saying. "It affects me too." "You've had almost 2 full years with him," Dad said calmly. "That'll give you ample data for your thesis, no problem." "Zan was more than a thesis, Richard. He was supposed to be a lifetime project for both of us." "It was a glorious idea, but it's not working, and there's nothing I can do about that." "There is. You're too impatient. You're not giving it enough time. Get rid of Jaworski and bring someone else in." "Greg was the perfect fit. You know that. He has a very, very rigid view of language. He doesn't even have his own children. So what? He has no first-hand knowledge of how children learn language. He's done study after study. Yes, studies. Which is exactly what we do, Sarah. Jaworski is respected. Well, you're respected, she said. I heard Dad sigh, almost sadly. Not like him. Mum said, "We've moved our family across the country for this project, Richard. You left your job at a good university. We left our friends behind in Ontario. We left our families. No great loss there. Not for you, maybe. Unlike you, I love my family. They drive you crazy, Sarah. You're well clear of them. Yes, the fewer people in your life, the better. People are so inconvenient to you." What is it you want to say, Sarah? You're shutting down Project Zan because it's more work than you imagined. Admit it. And I'm not talking about intellectual or even physical work. Emotional work. Zan wants relationships with us. He wants parents. He wants love. So what do? You walk away. If something's not the way you want, you just walk away. This is absurd, Dad said. You're talking about Zan like he's a human. I'm not. I'm also talking about your own son. There was an awful silence. Then Dad said, "How many times do we have to have this discussion?" "Richard, you didn't even want your own child," Mum said. I was taking these tiny, silent sips of air and felt suddenly lightheaded. "I didn't want a child right then," said Dad. "We were in the busiest stages of our educations. A lot of men would have walked away. I stuck it out." "Stuck it out," said Mum. "That's really heroic. I was the one who put my career on hold so you could finish your PhD. You've had it your way always, Richard. You wanted this project, and now you're killing it. Don't you care how Ben feels about this?" "Ben's upset, but this is not just about a boy and a pet. It's about my career. I started with nothing," he said fiercely. "Everything I got, I worked like hell for. The best marks, the scholarships, jobs, and I'm not going to let this experiment ruin my reputation. Ben'll get over it." "Maybe, but will he forgive you?" Mum said. After that, their voices got too quiet for me to hear. Even if Dad couldn't answer Mum's questions, I had a feeling I could. Through January and February, I put Zan to bed myself whenever Mum and Dad would let me. The students had no problem leaving a bit early. I liked giving Zan his bath and putting him in his pajamas and grooming him while he drank his bottle. Sometimes we looked at his favorite books, and sometimes I told him the story of his day. He'd groom me back, parting my hair, gently touching and removing bits of dried skin. He was always very calm, and loved having his hair combed as he lay across my lap. He still wouldn't go to sleep on his own, though. He'd arrange his blankets and his toys the way he wanted, but he needed you to lie down right beside him. Sometimes he'd leave an arm across your chest. I didn't mind. That was how they slept in the wild, in their nests, snuggled against their mothers. As I lay there, I thought of ways to save the project, ways to convince Dad to keep it going. Peter and I were making a big list of ideas. Officially, Project Zan was still going ahead. None of the other students had been told it was ending. Dad said he'd do that later in the spring. I had a couple of months to change his mind. It didn't take Zan long to fall asleep, but it was a trick to get away without waking him. Before, I used to get impatient, first lifting his limp arm clear, then shifting my body away inch by inch. Getting one leg down on the floor, then another, sliding my torso clear. Sometimes he'd wake up with a shriek and I'd have to start all over again. But these nights, I stayed with him until I was sure he was deep asleep. I liked the heat of his body. I liked the faster beat of his heart against my own. A couple of times I even fell asleep and Mum had to come and wake me. Once she let me sleep the whole night through with him. When I woke up, Zan was already awake and gently grooming the back of my head. He didn't seem surprised to see me in his bed, but he was certainly happy, and as I opened the curtains to let the sunlight in, I felt good about myself. I felt like I'd kept him safe.